Hello, everyone. Welcome to another month of the Chichester Chats. Of course, with that genius, that madman, that drone strike operator, Mr. DG Chichester. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing okay. I think it's a rainy day out, so nobody has to worry about looking up and being afraid I'll lose control of the drone. I want you guys to note that I broke out my one remaining, I think, truly skull-oriented shirt, for this. So but it's sort of like got prison stripes on it at the same time. So somehow I survived an encounter with Frank Castle and got sent to the big house.
Was it a competent day?
Very confident.
I'm the kingpin. Okay, shooting the leg. But no, yeah, we said we were gonna talk the Punisher Annual 4, which is like the middle part of the Von Strucker Gambit. So I might ask you some technical questions about how that all went down because the first part was the Daredevil Annual. Your friend Greg Wright wrote that. You and Greg wrote part 2, which is this Punisher Annual, and then part 3 was the Captain America Annual, which you wrote on your own. So,
yep. Mm-hmm.
So was that a conscious? So was that the whole plan where it's like, okay, Greg was going to write the first part, you were going to write the last part, and then you were going to double team the middle part?
Yeah, it's some of the very, very, very specifics will escape me in this long past time. But as we've sort of touched on before, Greg and I were and are good friends. We had the same interests. We like playing with the same characters. We sort of had the same agendas around things like Von Strucker and trying to elevate him and Hydra and such. So this was a good opportunity to go in with a story that would be sort of structured out, which would be fun for us, but also that type of thing is a boon to editors, right? They don't have to figure out how to cross over and do all these different sort of things in this way. You've kind of given them a package, especially with an annual, right? Where they've got to fill the pages of suddenly this extra book on top of everything else. And so by going in and saying, we're not going to take care of one annual problem for you, we're going to take care of three. And of course, then seize business from somebody else. But we were callous in those days, so we wouldn't have worried about that.
Not your circus, not your monkeys.
I love that expression. It's one of my favorites.
Well, again, the '90s, they seem to love to do that every year. It's just like package as many of those annuals as they could into one event. So
right, but it wouldn't, I think, always be one team, that would kind of carry it, or one.
Yeah,
writer.
no.
And even though it was separate writers in its own way, it was as much of a team play as anything else.
Well, they used to do those ones where it crossed over to every annual. So, I mean, you couldn't do one team for all those. But yeah, I mean, these ones where you do like 3, 4, 5 annuals.
Impossible. And you could always tell the ones when they would do those baton passes, I thought, where the writer especially probably just hated having to deal with something like that. You got that sense of like, I don't want to tell this story, so they'll do like this super quick nod to whatever the big incident is and then move on from there.
Aha, it is a choice.
It used to be in that way.
Yeah, it used to be.
You had to do it. If they said you have to do a nod to
3 pages and done.
Exactly, and then you kind of move on from there. But sometimes you could really embrace it and run with it and make it its own thing.
And was it a conscious decision? I mean, Nick Fury was in all these issues. I mean, why didn't Nick Fury get an annual, or did you not want to let that madman who's writing Nick Fury at the time in on this?
Every book wouldn't get an annual. Every character wouldn't get an annual. That wasn't a creative team choice, or even necessarily somewhat of an editorial choice. I'm sure if you had a title, and then you wanted to kind of go in and say, hey, we want an annual this year. Publishing, would look at it and say, okay, we can afford this. This makes sense. Because remember, these are tracked against what's popular. So, and kind of the overage. Now, of course, it's super saturation with especially characters like Batman, where you can't. We went in on free comic book day, and my wife went with me, and she was like, "There's so many Batman books. There's so many Batman books."
That's bad when a civilian can notice that.
Exactly. So you had to have characters that definitely could absorb the overage. What's
This
that's all the
week's new,
Batman books.
this week's new Batman books. Yes,
That's
8
this
books.
right, exactly.
that was like half my stack this week. Yeah,
So I think you had to have the popularity of a character. Punisher, obviously, huge in the '90s. Cap, okay, and definitely had the favor of Mark Grunwald, who loved the character, and rightly so, and did great work on it. So that had its additional kind of boost, and Cap is a mainstay, right? Cap's one of the ones, so to have that extra boost. Fury, mainstay, nowadays probably would get it, but at that point didn't support its own annual, I would say.
I just didn't know. Yeah, like since you were the writer on Nick Fury, if you could have just went in and could you? Would they have let you say, hey, let me do a Nick Fury annual? It'll be good. Maybe draw some attention to the monthly series, and hey, you have the Punisher, Daredevil, and Captain America to try to lift up
Um,
the sales on that annual.
Probably not as an annual, because annuals were looked at, I think, as an additional publishing boost. From an editorial point of view, they were sometimes more work, but they could also be, the boon would be that you get to test out other people on the character. From a creative point of view, they were a way to play with a character that you might not normally have the chance to play with, right? Maybe you'd never have a chance at a full-on Punisher book, but you could pitch a Punisher annual story and try to get in there. So I think I would probably have had more success going in and saying, I've got another Fury idea that isn't that shouldn't be contained within the pages. Let's do a Nick Fury one shot or a Nick Fury mini series, in addition to this. But then that's also going to balance out against, costs and sales and everybody else then doing the thing they do in their little star chamber where they sit around and say, well, this will never sell, or this it's X-Men, greenlight it, so I look like I'm a genius. No, and it's not that simple. I mean, there's truth in between those two extremes. But you also get ridiculous things. Infamously, at least for me, there was a Wolverine Havoc crossover. Do I have the characters right? I think so. That came out through Epic Comics. That
The Meltdown thing, yeah.
Meltdown. Jay Muth, Kent Williams, and there were people in sales who infamously said, this would have sold so much better with real artists on it, and or regular artists, I should say. In other words, that the painterly style of those two, which made it so distinctive, was somehow a detriment to it, and it would have sold better as a crossover if it had more traditional comic book art. And maybe it would have, but on the other hand, maybe it wouldn't have stood out at all. So long way around, Phil. Sorry. But
no, that's all right. No,
I would have been better off pitching, a Fury one-shot miniseries, so rather than an annual.
Meltdown was what, late 80s, early 90s. That was them probably saying there weren't enough boobs in it. You need more boobs. It's an X-Men book.
Somebody throw Emma Frost in there, please.
It was a sense of, especially the work that we're doing at Epic, and I don't know if I can't remember if it had, I don't think it had an Epic imprint on it. It probably didn't, but that book definitely came out of the Epic offices in the sense that it was Jay and Kent, who we had worked with extensively on their own books. We had been their entry point into Marvel. Their relationship with Walt and Weezy, Walt Simonson, Louise Simonson, who were the writers, allowed it to have that additional kind of boost. But it was, it was just a sense of some people that painted, illustrated comics didn't sell, and they weren't. There was some weird independent offshoot, even though we were doing them at Marvel under Epic. And we had sort of been some of the early bellwethers of doing that kind of work on a consistent
that makes
basis.
me so sad, because Epic is literally the foundation of a lot of my comic book stuff.
That's great. That's
a lot of people feel that way too, so it's just so sad to hear that in the moment it was like that.
Oh, in the moment it was fighting tooth and nail. And Archie Goodwin, who was the editor-in-chief of Epic, was sort of Aragorn and Iron Man and every other leader character you could sort of roll together, and in the sense that he was the protective zone around that. And once he left, that's when you really saw the pressure applied to Epic don't treat yourself like something special. Treat yourself. You're just another book, and that's when it all got split up. All the titles got split up among just Marvel editors. There's no longer an Epic. There might be an Epic imprint, but there wasn't an Epic dedicated office mindset.
Kind of like what happened to Vertigo, yeah.
Yeah, later on, right. Once Karen Berger was forced out, wasn't she?
Yep.
In that own way. And then it lost that. Which, it's a tricky balance of should everything just be dependent on one person in a way? No, it shouldn't.
But sometimes there's a linchpin for a reason.
But sometimes there's a linchpin. And since Greg came up in conversation, just so you know, Greg was often called the linchpin of Marvel Comics because he acted that way. And he wasn't really, but we gave him a lot of shit for it. But a highly influential editor, but sometimes,
sometimes you just gotta keep your friends, just get that little chip.
Exactly. So
I deal with Phil all the time.
What? Here, go ahead, tell him.
Hey, yeah, exactly.
That's why we're doing worst super comic book movies.
Oh yeah, I said a couple weeks. Weeks ago. The podcast is down to how can I annoy her? How can she annoy me? That's about
nice.
it. You gave me this crap. I'm gonna give you this crap. Just back
and
and
the
forth.
kids are just like, mommy and daddy are fighting.
I should take the headphones off.
But I know back to the one Strucker. I just personally, because Mark Grunwald's my favorite cap writer. Did you have any interaction or a lot of interaction with him, writing that cap annual? Or
I'm sure he read it. I don't remember any notes or anything back on it in terms of you got to do this, you got to do that. I was very respectful of Mark's cap in general, and Mark's cap. So I'm sure I hewed close to the zone of that interpretation of the character. And Mark was a terrific guy, and I was way too intimidated by him at the time to really have a good relationship. Greg had a phenomenal relationship with him because he had worked for him directly as his assistant and really got to know him well. But I was very intimidated by Mark because he could be really totally zany and crazy and was really the heart and soul of a certain era of Marvel fun, but he could also be very reserved and quiet, which I took to be sort of standoffish, incorrectly on my part. But the one sit down I had with Mark earlier in my career when I wrote a really short story for Solo Avengers with Margaret Clark, he spent so much time with us on this 8-page story of feedback and here's what you need to do to make it better. It was incredible. You think about it. This guy was here and he's taking all this time for an 8-page story that may never have run, right? It could have just been inventory. And so I know that was certainly also in the back of my head, even though he didn't have a direct sit down. It was, this guy really cares about this character. He's carried the mantle on it. I've really got to do a good job.
Oh, I know. He was one of those. Yeah, he did 10 years on Captain America.
Oh yeah, incredible.
I think he was the editor before that. So I mean, yeah, he was involved with.
Oh, he loved the character. Yep.
Yeah, I think I've heard that he was one of those. He was another Mark Waid where he had an encyclopedic knowledge of all these comics and stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, Mark started, if not started, was certainly the driving, force behind the handbook to the Marvel Universe, especially the first version, which if hopefully you've seen it, the first version is encyclopedic in terms of it's not the second version was more character sheets and a couple of details, but the first version had entire stories and how the technology worked and diagrams.
It shaped our friend Charlie Esters' whole childhood.
Yeah, and you had hardcore nerds and geeks behind the scenes who were so deeply invested in figuring that shit out. It was amazing. Always behind the 8 ball in terms of schedule because there was so much that had to go into it in terms of research and putting it together, and it was so right. It was totally comprehensive.
Oh yeah.
So you're always chasing, hundreds of characters, and as those characters, then you're chasing with the appendixes. New characters been created while you're doing it. So
they don't make annuals like this anymore, though. I don't know. Maybe they're afraid to. I don't know.
Do they
maybe our attention span's too short. I mean, they do, but not like this. It's always for instance, a Shadow War or something like that, or King in Black. Just don't. It's not a quiet, subtle kind of thing anymore.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's more manufactured, and I don't mean that as a bad word necessarily, but they're thinking about the bigger events. These annuals were kind of coming out of the newsstand.
Yeah, it felt more organic.
Yeah. But well, yes, they're organic, but they're also just coming out of it's a newsstand sale mentality of put something else out in the newsstand, it will sell because it's there for the week or the couple of weeks of getting your attention, and we just need to fill another sales slot with something semi-popular that's not really going to screw up the regular continuity in the book too much, right? Because the annual doesn't necessarily overlap. Sometimes it overlapped with the book itself, but not always, not usually. So it's just like kind of it's an extra, special value add, boost.
Yes.
And it's got, it's got some good stuff. It's got some when I was rereading it, it's crazy just how much, the pages just kind of run into each other in a lot of ways. They don't, especially then they've got ads for other things in there, and am I looking at an ad page? Am I looking at a comic story page? That's very organic.
So I mean, you could tell you and Greg thought this out, put the tender loving care on it and everything. So did you go to them and be like, okay, we want the Daredevil annual, the Punisher annual, and the Captain America annual?
Yeah, I think we knew there were openings on the annuals. The annuals would open, and the annuals are great extra assignments. Remember, It's a business too. We're having a time of our lives and enjoying it and trying to be creative, but you're also gaming for, I'd like another couple of dollars in my pocket. And so you had a regular book, or maybe you're lucky to have a few regular books, but the annuals, what was this, 8, 10, 12 pages, something like that? All right, I can quote-unquote knock that off in a certain amount of time, and it's a nice extra couple hundred, maybe depending on the length, a couple $1,000 or something like that, depending on what you're doing. So if I could go in, which Greg and I 95% certain we did, somebody didn't come to us independently and then we got together and said, oh, I'm running the Cap one and I'm running the Daredevil one. And I think we just went in and said, hey, the annuals are opening up. Why don't we just pitch the offices that we've got one big story, and we can grab all three, and then we'll split the middle, and you can see within there, I can see, okay, that's Greg's in joke, that's my line, that's but threading out the whole story and playing up Strucker again, Von Strucker, was certainly on the agenda for us.
See, he was setting up that Nick Fury book, I'm telling you. So Greg wrote the Daredevil one. Did he request to do the Daredevil one, or were you just like, you know what, I write Daredevil every other month. You know what, you can take Daredevil. I want to take my shot at Cap.
I can definitely see that being the conversation. And he had done. I don't know if he had done any Daredevil fill-ins at that point on such, but I definitely see that as being part of it. If we can go after all this, I don't need more Daredevil.
Yeah.
Here's a chance for you to kind of play with it, and then probably it's exactly that, Phil. I probably would have angled for, wait, I can write Cap. Here's my way to play that. So that was a more interesting way to play it out.
And was it story driven, or were you two just like, we both want to do Punisher, so we'll make that the middle part?
No, I think it was story driven, and then obviously toward the end of the whole Von Strucker thing, you learn Von Strucker's been testing all these characters and seeing who could potentially be spoiler alert, who could be a potential Hydra recruit for the future.
It's only been 30 years.
But wait, can't you keep it to yourself? But I think it was that you're again looking at, okay, who can we convince to let us play in all these spaces, and also the popularity of the Punisher again. You're doing a Punisher story. I'm not doing different company, Blue Beetle, story or something like that. Even though he's getting a movie now. But so here's a way to play it up and get everybody on the cover together, and you get to play with a very, very popular character at the time. Although obviously now, especially in all other instances, I look back at what we did with the Punisher and say, oh, those were good things, and then those are awful, just gun worship things. So,
America.
yeah, I always looked at him as a very interesting, complex, complicated character. I would look to what Chuck Dixon and Mike Barron, were doing with the character, and want to kind of get more under the hood. And then certainly, I think my big swipe at the character was when I did the crossover with Cap. But that was the most interesting thing to me. Not that, oh, look, he's going to go in and slaughter a bunch of characters. But at the same time, I was ordering books from, there was a publisher, I think they were called Paladin Press, and they would advertise in the back of not necessarily regular comics, but certainly things like Eerie and stuff, and they just sold crazy sets of books, like underground things, like breakdowns of weapon systems, how to kill volumes 1
The
through 7.
Chichester Files. That's how they came.
Pretty much, yeah. So, I mean, and I would order these things, and I'd be like, oh, this is great techniques for the Punisher. But it's
Nice.
You're trying to add like detail to it, but also at the same time checking yourself and saying this is becoming indulgence. This isn't adding to the story.
Have you seen what Marvel's doing with him right now?
Some weird thing where they had him join the Hand or something, or he's
Yeah,
joining the Hand, and he
they
changed his thing
Yeah.
to some, I don't know what it's supposed to be, a Japanese demon or something like that. It looks like from a distance.
I think he's under their spell, but they resurrected his dead wife. So
Oh,
The
okay.
children.
I said I can't wait to see that go so wrong when he starts
They're
killing
gonna
them
have
all.
to call
Oh,
Elektra,
yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, and they're gonna, and then he'll take whatever that symbol is and he'll slash it, and it'll be back to the
We
skull
hope
thing
at
again.
least. We hope they don't
Of
let the
course
bad
it
guys win with that symbol.
No, I mean it'll be it's Cap Hydra all over again, except not as severe and in exactly the same way. But unfortunately, that's the problem with people who interpret these characters at their worst, right? And I think that's where Marvel's reacting in a not quite clear way. The clear way would just be doing a press release or a statement or even a comic that addressed the overt aspects of what people are trying to interpret, with the character, as opposed to saying, well, he has all these layers. There's Nazis who adopt Cap, right? Our real world Nazis, our real world, people who are adopting Cap. You've got figures of authority, police organizations, God help us, putting the Punisher symbol on their uniforms, and that's sort of just looking at this aspect of the character, one single aspect of the character, which done wrong, that's all the character is. Done right, that is a horrible aspect of the character, which even he recognizes is horrible. The Punisher TV series. I mean, I haven't watched it in a few years, but John Bernthal was the actor, right?
Mhm.
I mean, brought, I thought, a lot of that. I mean, it's awful
Nuance,
the things he
yeah.
does. Nuance. It's a hard word with that show, Lilith. But I mean, but yeah, you're right. But I mean, his actions are horrible, horrible, and in a way, that's what the Punisher should be, as opposed to glorification. Now, I even look at this 12 pages, and I did some stupid glorification stuff. I'm serving up a course of 9mm retribution. That's such a 90s line in there. That's like beyond the pale. It's like, oh wow, but.
Oh, speaking of series, as one of the all-time Daredevil writers, did you see that the Daredevil series is coming back on Disney
I
Plus
did.
now?
I did. I'm excited. I mean, we knew that was going to happen. Why are you going to recruit Charlie Cox, into it, unless you're going to
He's
have.
just a variant, okay?
Yeah, well, unless you're going to have the Scarlet Witch come in and turn him into spaghetti, he goes to catch the brick and it breaks his hand instead, that the whole.
Oh,
She casts his spell, shatters his whole arm, but
yeah.
it's all over for him. Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be yet. I mean, I see a lot of people already semi-trolling. It better be just as R-rated as the Netflix series was, or Disney will have
Why?
screwed it over. Oh, exactly. Daredevil can be as any character can be most of the time. If it's a good character, you can interpret it in many different ways. I don't know what that world's going to be though yet. Because even I was so hyped with the Kingpin and Hawkeye. We
Yeah.
diverge away from this into the television annual, and the first couple of appearances of him are like, and all the talk about him, right? They're building him up. They're building him up. They're building him up. And even the first moments he sort of appears, it's got that sense of menace. And then by the end, we've got him being beaten up in an unclear way in a toy store. So who is he? And why is he doing the Hawaiian shirt thing? And why is he so powerful but not totally powerful? So I don't know what that world's going to be yet. Like that.
I don't think they do either, honestly.
Maybe they don't either.
They got to do some more market research before they can decide.
I guess it's a different Kingpin. It's not the same. It's not going to be the same bash. Your head in the door to test it out for the. I don't know if I like this model. Let me see who I can crush the skull of. Does the hybrid crush the skulls as as well as the diesel, but I'm excited to see what they do with it, because I think there's so many ways they can interpret it. They could have a much more energetic, Daredevil. Like we could actually see Daredevil swinging across the city without being Spider-Man. We could get a lot more dramatic water tower type visuals. We could really open up other aspects, for the character beyond the intensity of the Netflix one, and still be great.
I mean, look, we're talking to a man right now. He wrote Daredevil for how many years? You could do Daredevil that's not rated R and still compelling, right?
Yeah, it doesn't. It can. The comics were hard, so they could be very hard, but I would argue they were not R rated. We didn't have Daredevil slaughtering people or that sort of things, and where there were harder moments, they were balanced against other things.
Now this is gonna shock Phil, but the Cap Annual was my favorite. Just gonna throw that out there. I'm not a huge Captain America fan. I'm not.
Sir, you've done the Lord's work if you could get her to say any issue of Captain America was her favorite. So.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, that's a good way.
Well, he just a lot of time doesn't feel relatable, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think people have a hard time doing that balance. Like you're Captain America, you're for the people, but you're this unattainable kind of thing. A lot of times is how they write them. So. Did
you read the any of the Grunwald storyline?
Phil keeps telling me to, so I might.
He's very relatable there. Sometimes I found him actually too relatable. I wanted the sort of a bit more of the icon, but I also realize you can't do that sustainably, over time in a regular book. So I think that's where Mark, had moments where he's so super ordinary. It's definitely worth checking out if you're into the relatability aspect of it.
Okay.
You heard Lilith. That's the expert telling you so. Don't believe me.
I'm glad you like that one. And I think the Cap story here also had the advantage of it's always more fun and easier to wrap things up because you get to punctuate everything, right? You get to do the reveal and you get to do the satisfying close. Greg in some ways had the hardest.
Being the middle child's hard, man.
Well, I was going to say this one's actually in some ways the hardest and probably the least satisfying of the stories, especially the way it's structured, because it's carrying a bridge and getting the Punisher involved. It's almost like getting the character. Its purpose is to drag the Punisher into this, in some ways, but it doesn't have the advantage of the setup that would happen in the Daredevil one in the same way.
I'm not saying this all he is, but is it more challenging to write a Punisher story where you're like, well, I have to come up with a feasible way where Punisher doesn't kill everybody?
Without mercy bullets, preferably?
Yeah.
I think, it's a complex character in that way for a writer or creative team who wants to go beyond the pale of the bullets flying and the bodies stacking up, and this is such a horrible week to be talking about this, but I guess America will have another horrible week next week, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it is that it is challenging to think of ways to find the complexity of the character as opposed to falling back into the easy seat of just have him shoot everybody. And it would be fun, right? It would be fun. He'll have a bigger gun. There'll be bigger explosions. There'll be a bigger visual. But it's that's lazy creativity. And again, nowadays it's also, what are you doing? I would not say that was in anybody's head back when we were doing the character. Then I'd be lying. We were probably just having fun with it and saying, "Oh look," it'd be because we were reflecting everything else.
Well, it's 1991 too. I mean, I'm sure.
Hot off that hot selling Punisher video game.
Punisher video game. Look how big.
Got like 3 books going on.
Look how big Rambo's gun is. Well, our gun will be bigger. Whatever, was going on in the culture at the time. But the complexity of the character as a soldier and things like that certain writers could reflect because they had more time with it. Dixon again, Barron, to me, always stand out. Stephen Grant, maybe most especially. I think his work with Grell really was the first time I at least looked at it and said, "Wait a minute, that's something else." Kind of going on. It wasn't Mike Grell. Who did he work with? Stephen Grant worked with. I'm blanking at the moment, but his work, initially was some of the more thoughtful, considerate, but still exciting Punisher work.
I'm always interested in like the different takes people have on the Punisher. Especially back then, if you could do a different take, in the '90s, that's.
I would have just always assumed that they just wanted that fun, and he shoots people for 15 pages kind of thing. Like that's kind of like the brand that I think is Punisher's best known for at that particular time. So
I think it would be
probably some pushback if you wanted to do something different.
Not necessarily pushback, so long as you had the firing line stuff as well. So if you could guarantee, if you came in and you had a Punisher, well, it would have been proto-Sopranos, I guess, right? If your whole thing was the Punisher goes to see his therapist, and you played, which would have been, think about that, that would have been awesome, right? I'm surprised nobody pitched that at some point, at the height of the Sopranos, or maybe they did. But as long as you said there's going to be a payoff at some point, a big Punisher action, you could do whatever you wanted in between because you were delivering on the big thing. I mean, I'll again pat myself on the back. The Blood and Glory Punisher Captain America crossover that I did with Margaret Clark and Klaus Janson. All the back dialogue and all this stuff is like this challenges of these ruined soldiers. Is him especially and what they've gone through and how the Vietnam soldier compares against the World War II soldier and things like that. I mean, I was pretty pleased with that at that time, and I think it still probably holds up. But nobody asked us to do all that stuff. Nobody asked us to do these things questioning American morality or weapons deals or those types of things. We could have just had a mob war, but that doesn't feel like it advances the character, and it doesn't get you to a new place, and it doesn't open up new doors, and you're not as charged up.
But it's so easy with the Punisher to do the status
It's so easy, absolutely. And
nobody would even bat an eye. Just yep, okay.
Yeah.
But I do like when people do push those boundaries and do something new, because it's like, yeah, he is a soldier. He is messed up, and as we find out in this more current model, he's been messed up since he was a kid. So it wasn't the wife and kids dying that messed him up.
Well, who knows? Yeah, I guess that's certainly that could be played really well, like in the Hulk, right? And opening up all these doors to what happened to him as a child. That could also just become, please,
passe.
Could be adding in a bunch of stuff. 18 months from now, we could find out that the Punisher is actually the personification of the great cosmic god of vengeance. It can He's a cousin to the Ghost Rider energy or something like that. I don't know.
Is that always the danger of characters who've been around decades, and if you don't reboot, it's just, people always want to put their brand on it. It's like, oh no, he became the Punisher and crazy at 21 when his family was killed. No, 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 no. I have a story where he was like this since he's been 15, and people just want to keep
wait for it. He killed the family dog when he was 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Or we find out that he's actually the Highlander type character and he's actually survived. He's the same Punisher for the last 2,700 years.
Reincarnated. Ah.
Or just, he just moves on. Like, he actually planned the murder of his family so he could get rid of the family, move on to a new family. That would be awesome. That would be really messed up.
Him and Moon Knight just reincarnating over this.
Exactly. Hippo shows up at the time. And...
now you're giving them ideas. If I see it, I better see a Chichester credit.
You don't remember your former life as Genghis Khan.
Exactly.
Oh, God.
Sorry, what your question was about? Just
yeah, just everyone after decades, people just want to put their own stamp on like the origin.
Because you come into it and you feel like you wanna do your thing, rightly or wrongly. I think you go in with an agenda, and then as you get into the actual doing of it, that's where the metal, meets the road, as it were, and you have to see if what you want to do plays out. How does the character get in your head and make you want to do different things? Hopefully, that's it starts to lead you along the way. So I think anybody coming in, some people would come in and it would just be the glorification of the gun cult, Lilith, right? I mean, at that point, it's like, and that was fun at the time. I'm not going to lie to you guys in the sense. It was like, it felt like fun. Great. They're big movies with big guns. We get to do big comics with big guns.
Yeah, but how did Michael Bay not direct a freaking Punisher movie in the 90s? Honestly, I don't know how they didn't do that.
Seriously.
Explosion, lens flare.
It's not J.J. Abrams. It's just explosions.
But
and hot girls in bikinis.
Yeah. But you want to open up the character, and you want to, what you're saying about the current stuff where they're finding out stuff from his childhood or whatever. I'm not familiar with that, but clearly they're saying this is our stamp on the character. We're going to add this other layer here, and we're going to open it up, and we're going to contribute other things.
Well, that's the blessing, the cursing of modern comics. After it gets to like issue maybe 50 if you're lucky, and you get a new creative team, it's reboot, nothing matters.
Well, that's a full hard reboot, right?
Yeah.
That's throw everything out. That's
baby with the bathwater, yes sir.
Right. That's John Byrne. To me, that was one of the first times I remember that, like just starting Superman over, and it's just, he had license to do whatever he wanted, right? I think probably all they got out of him was, he'll come from another planet called Krypton, and then from there he got to just say whatever, but then you introduce all this crazy stuff, and then at the point where John leaves or anybody leaves, and you want to bring it back, well, all that baggage comes with it. It's not like he's clean. It's now conflated, or integrated, or coagulated, or
Oh yeah, I mean his origin is like Superman was never Superboy. The Legion of Superheroes writers were like, wait, what? Our whole thing is
why are you on that? Phil, you know that is my one true week. Do not mention that to me. We've literally been chasing that thread for 40 years at this point.
I know.
This makes me so mad.
No, but I joked about it before, but I mean, you were the writer on the Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. book at the time, so I mean, I'm sure you probably tempted to maybe write Nick Fury in a more positive light, but no, I mean, you wrote him here. It's like, oh no, Fury's not as clean as
Nick Fury's gonna be Nick Fury. He's whatever you want him to be.
And also Fury's had, well, yes, you could write Nick Fury as Roger Ramjet type of straight arrow, but he's never been that way. I mean, Nick Fury, the Howling Commandos. I mean, this guy's always had a cigar in his mouth and grit in his soul, and
he's been in the military for 50 years. It's like, oh no, he's done something.
And he's been running an espionage agency, and everything's being done. He's discovered underhanded characters. He's been an underhanded character. He's manipulated things. It's. I think the trick with characters, though, is you have to find what they aspire to and what's their higher purpose too. Otherwise, you are in just a downward spiral of a Nick Fury, and look, he's involved with all this dark stuff within the government, the dark stuff he's done himself. It's a darkness that will never end, and all you're doing is writing a miserable character. Or it could be the same thing with the Punisher, even if he's self-aware of, and he's not just doing the gun cult stuff, and he's like, I am violence to fight violence. What is the, the part of me that is still worthy of my wife and children, or whatever. I'm sure I wrote that caption at one point, but but it's, but if you let yourself go there, and you never have a way out of that, it just gets to be darker and darker and more miserable. I read a proposal the other day, and it was just about I can't give away what it was about, but it was it was young adults, starting their career, right? And it was supposed to be a drama, but it is a drama, but every single one of these people had such miserable existences within the things that were going on. It's like, I'm going to lose the apartment, I'm going to lose this.
So a show about millennials, okay.
You're already there, but everyone was like, so like everyone doesn't need to have an equal weight of awfulness problem, and the whole thing was just going down this funnel of tension and darkness and depression. It's like, oh, this will be a fun read.
No, it's a sign of a good writer. It's like, yeah, not everyone has to have the same level of issues, and
right, and also what's the inherent tension of
if every character is the same thing, yeah,
right. And where does the Punisher as a character sometimes balance out certain things? Lethal force is I guess his ultimate promise, to everybody. And it'd be easy to just say he goes in and wipes the floor of everybody every single time, but then you miss out on, well, sometimes he wants to maybe leverage a source, for longer term use against his enemies and such. Did Grant or Barron do the it might have been Dixon. It was one of those guys. They all did such good work. There's that great scene with the burning the guy, torturing him. You ever see that one? I can't remember what issue it was in, but he's burning the flesh of this guy, with hot tongs, and torturing him to get the information. The guy can smell smell his skin sizzling, and feel the burn, and he's screaming, and gives up the information. And then you pull back from the scene, and you see the guy's tied to a chair, and you see behind him the Punisher's has a grill going with some meat.
Oh, I think I remember that.
He's using like this frozen, stick to act like it's this hot prong, and doing the psyops on this guy because he wants to cultivate him as long-term source. So in that instance, it was not the easy choice of, yes, I'm torturing this guy and I will do whatever it takes. There's a bit of cleverness and humor.
That is clever.
Now, that's a Punisher I can get behind.
Yeah, psychological torture. Yeah, give a little ideas.
But later on, when he becomes against other forces, he'll pull out the 50 guns and away he goes.
So is this story the best of both worlds? He gets to be in a crossover with Daredevil and Captain America, but when he shows up, there's none of them around to say, "No, don't be killing people, Frank. Don't be killing people."
Yeah. And you had I didn't do the page count on this, but it isn't a full 22 pages. What is it? It's like, I'm going to say again, it's 12, 15 pages or something. So if you don't have to be complicated by that, don't be. Other characters showing up. I feel even in rereading this, there's just some places where we could have done a better job introducing certain things or establishing certain things, calling out some of the other elements, even when they're referring to other characters within the story, putting up a visual of them, and even as it gets to the end of it, it just ends, right? There's no concludes in the the Von Strucker Gambit and Cap Annual. It's just sort of like you turn the page, and that's what I meant about the way it's sort of editorially written. I turn the page and I'm like, where am I? I don't know what's going on. It's but it's fun.
I mean, it was the nature of those annuals at the time, though, too. It's like you only got a certain page count, and again, Daredevil's only going to show up in his portion, so you kind of have to end the Daredevil section within those pages. The only thing going forward is like Fury and Von Strucker, even Von Strucker's agents. You get a new one each issue, so it's
right. And you're also playing to the fan, or you're trying to play to the fan base, of the annual itself, right? The person who's going to pick up the Daredevil annual is not necessarily a Punisher fan, and a Cap annual is not necessarily a Daredevil fan. They might be, and they probably are to some extent. They're not unhappy to see those characters, but if I pick up a Daredevil annual, I want to read a Daredevil story, right?
Yeah.
So you don't want to like suddenly bag it down with like, no, Frank, think about it. Let me pat you on the shoulder and punch you in the jaw, tell you not to pick up that weapon.
And I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think you had the hardest task. It's like because Cap fans may not necessarily be Punisher fans and vice versa.
It's exactly what that's exactly what I'm getting at. You're not.
I think that was the hardest sell. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think you had the hardest job. Any other questions, Lilith Hellfire?
No, just a nice pat on the back for DJ and
another good job.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, this is fun. And sorry that I couldn't invest enough time to kind of get into other issues and talk about the whole Von Strucker, Gambit arc. We did predate the Queen's Gambit. I should point that out. By many years, we definitely were ahead of our time. And
like I said, I basically just wanted to know the technical aspects of just these crossovers between annuals and stuff. And
yeah, and as we've touched on before, I would hope that creators today have the same access and ability to sort of pitch things. I don't know, but we had a very easy relationship creatively with the editors, with ourselves. Certainly, my friendship.
Nowadays, it seems like they pick somebody that has like a big, huge story to do like the overarching thing, and then they grab like whoever they want to like fill in the one shots instead. That's what it feels like to me.
And that's as we talked about maybe toward the beginning of this, that would always be the case, somewhat. Now that's maybe a lot more refined, because if you had a big story arc that was going to shake the whole Marvel universe.
Yeah, like the Devil's Reign thing it's crazy. I don't know if you can keep it up, but like
I have not. I'll read it when it's all.
You can listen to the podcast.
But
we got it all covered.
Well, there you got it all covered. Even easier. But I don't know how. I mean, I had the impression, and I don't know that that's the case, but I would imagine just because of Zdarsky's imprint on the character, that he would have probably driven that. Maybe a lot. I don't know. Maybe that's overstating it, but I think he's got such a.
No, I think from all the interviews, they were definitely Chip's the guy.
Right.
And
so
we're just here trying to live up to Chip's expectations.
Yeah. So he could map. He could have mapped the whole thing out, or big swatches of it, and then maybe maybe with his relationship with Marvel, he ends up being almost like a consulting editor as well. Because. Yeah, yes, you have to. That's always the nature of these big crossovers. We've talked about that on other episodes where you're doing the baton pass from one to the other. And I did stories with Fabian Nicieza and Chuck Dixon, and we would do, some crossovers. We would go out to lunch and we would figure out the big beats, and then all right, at the end, she needs to be kidnapped and in a warehouse. I need you to do that, Chuck, because I'm going to pick up that at that point, right? And Chuck could do whatever he wanted to get so and so into that warehouse and kidnapped. But then at that point, I pick the baton up and then I give it to Fabian or whoever, and you just worked out the beats. So that could be the same things. You need to accomplish this within the Devil's Reign. Whatever's going on, who's ever in there, they need to do this and this, and then you get to read it and say, no, not so much, or dead on, and that's really cool.
I mean, Chip's taken over the whole industry because within the next month or so, not only is he going to be writing Daredevil again, he's going to be writing the main Batman book too.
And plus all his indie stuff too on top.
Yeah, and he's doing a bunch of indie stuff. So I mean, yeah, Chip's taking over.
That's great. That's really great. It's tough. No,
it's like him, Tom Taylor, Joshua Williamson. Like we got a new batch. It's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it seems like they pick a handful, they burn them out, then they pick some new handful, give them 20 books a month, burn them out. Yeah.
To be fair.
Yeah. Maybe all creative industries are unforgiving, in that sense where, certain people flame really high and they look like they're owning the world, and then you're nothing to us anymore, and you move out. and you're kind of on your way. I think I've said it before. One of the most heartbreaking and insightful essays to read is Herb Trimpe's New York Times editorial. I've talked about this before,
Yep.
right? There's a guy who's a mainstay of comics, and then at the point where it's your style's not a thing anymore. It doesn't matter, you're on contract. Yep, whatever. See ya. And suddenly, at an age younger than I am now, he's out. He's out. And what do you do after doing this your whole life? How do you suddenly figure out, how do I support my family, how to do this and do that? So, not that any of these guys are going to be in that situation, tomorrow, but at some point they will, and hopefully what they're doing with, maybe they're just smart.
Yeah, the industry has changed. You have a few more options now. Not enough, but a few more than what it used to be.
But if within the smartness and the multimedia-ness of it, and the fact that pop culture is an exciting thing, I would say, and it's talent as well, but I would say, Chip Zdarsky has a lot easier time going in to another media place like a Netflix or something and saying,
Oh, yeah.
I want to pitch a story because I was the Daredevil writer, than I would have been, right? It was like, oh, wait, who are you, Frank Miller? And that would be, yes.
No, I like women.
And ouch.
But do you think is that something you could put on your resume if you go in for a project like that to Netflix or something? Where you're like, I've been able to keep the schedule of however many, I write 6 monthly comics a month, or and I don't think it's no. I think if you're going in.
Well, it didn't work very well for Mark Millar or whatever with Jupiter. Yeah, but they had they were going to build the whole universe, and then things change. They bought all his properties, and they're not doing anything with it right now. So
maybe they will when they think the climate's better or less saturated. But I don't think it's from a writing point of view and an external industry point of view. Keeping a schedule is not going to be important. They're not even going to think about that. Comics have a schedule. Comics have writers. To this day and age, do you draw it? To this day and age, you'll probably still get the same.
It's kind of like before podcasts were cool. What's a podcast?
Right, but being able to say it sold X number of issues, and look how many articles were written about it, and there's 1,000 podcasts about it, and there's 1,000 YouTube videos about it, and I have so many it becomes
that's what it's become for sure.
It becomes that, and that's a better place to be. Going in and saying I worked. If you were going in for a job that required efficiency or editorialness of it, and there is just an allure of comics that is about I worked on a comic. And, there's comics companies I remember from 20 years ago and again today in their own way who just produce comics in order to have a property. Right, I did some stuff.
Looking at you, Malibu Comics. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. As somebody who is deeply entrenched in the indie world of comic books, I'm kidding.
Sure, but there are imprints that only do that, right? They will come out. I worked for a company 20 years back. They would only ever print one copy of the thing, or 10 maybe. They never even put them on sale. But what they wanted to do was be able to go in to a movie producer or TV producer and say, look, it's a comic book. Was that producer going to take time out of
Transformers effect?
Yeah, was that yes, was that producer going to take time and send his assistant out? I want you to go to Atlantic Street Comics and and find out if this guy's for real. If he brought in a comic book, that said issue whatever $5.95 or something, it's a comic book. Look, I can leaf through it. There's suddenly this. This magic.
That's genius, actually.
And it's the James T. Kirk. I changed.
You gotta game the system however you can.
Exactly. I changed
capitalism, and that's on capitalism.
So.
Great insight as always.
I think that's a great way to end the episode. How to game the system by T.G. Chichester.
Game the system. Make the things work to your advantage.
That's the new
if you
Substack
can.
article for the month. There you go.
There you go. I'm going to write that right now.
How to Kobayashi Maru the capitalism.
Anytime you can end on the Kobayashi Maru, that's it. If I had an apple and I wasn't allergic to apples, I'd take a bite into it right now.
Does that mean you're allergic to roses too, or just the apples, just actual fruit?
It's weird. It's like it's raw apples and raw carrots, raw pears. It's like that whole class of, I don't know what they would be, like stone fruits or something like that.
Yeah.
It's and for whatever reason, yeah.
Yeah. My 9-year-old tries to give me that excuse too.
Exactly. Yeah, Dad, I'm allergic to broccoli. So what's next? What do we have on me? What do you?
All
what do you got
right.
for me
Well, next month. All right. Watch Little Size roll. We're gonna do another fill-in. DG filled in for West Coast Avengers number 38.
Is that the infamous one? It has to be the catcher's mitt. From.
It might be.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I'm like.
West Coast Avengers number 38.
Yeah, that's the only one I did, so I've taken more.
At least
shit
it's not
for
Great
that,
Lakes, so.
No, it'll be fun. That was a lot of fun with that book. Okay.
All right. So yeah, stay on the line. But when we're done, I have something else to discuss with you too. Something big. All right. Before we go, Mr. DG Chichester, where can people find the newsletter? And
my newsletter, which I'm behind on, I got to catch up, and I will today, is storymaze.substack.com. Please check it out. And again, as always, guys, it's a lot of fun. Fun way to start a Saturday. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure. All right, so kids, come back next month. West Coast Avengers number 38. Well, can't wait.
No, I mean, it's been a while since I've read some, so I might find something new and interesting to pull from.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of reading comics, You don't read it for a while and you like, oh, it wasn't that bad.
I know.
I believe the cover copy on it, I'm pretty sure, is their greatest battle ever. And the cover copy, as you know, never lies. So
never. All right, kids. Yes, come back next month. Till then.